Hello everyone, my name is Bianca COF. So in a few weeks, most of you or some of you will be going to certain places to do something important, such as elect or vote for something we have coming up, as well as the propositions. So I'm here because I want to speak to you about one of the propositions. So the proposition I'm going to argue is about Proposition 57 and why we should all vote no. So to better define Proposition 57, it's basically going to allow early parole consideration for non-violent felons, authorizes sentence credits for rehabilitation, good behavior, education, and it will also provide juvenile court judges whether juveniles will be prosecuted as adults. So to go ahead and better clarify, I'm going to give you my 3 supporting claims of why we should vote no. So 1, Prop 57 does not clarify what exactly non-violent felons are. 2, Prop 57 will only cause the recidivism rate to increase. 3, Prop 57 is going to mirror a previous proposition in 2014 known as Proposition 47, which is currently in effect. So let's start with my first point. Proposition 57. Again, it does not clarify what is considered nonviolent felons. I had to do some research. I had to look into it to see exactly what these are. So I'm going to list some of them. Assault with a deadly weapon, rape, oral copulation of unconscious person, or by the use of using a date rape drug, human trafficking involving a minor, active participation in a gang, exploding destructive device with intent to cause injury. These are just some. I'm not listing all of them. So I want to give you an example of this. So John Felix is my example. Some of you may know his name, some of you may not. He was recently involved in 2 murders in Palm Springs recently, about a few weeks ago. So he in 2009 was convicted with assault with a deadly weapon. He was sentenced for 4 years, but was released in 18 months. So according to the California legislative information, to better define assault with a deadly weapon, it's any person who commits an assault upon the person of another with a deadly weapon or instrument, such as a knife, other than a firearm, shall be punished by state prison. So he had this in 2009. He was released 18 months later, and about a few weeks ago, he went and murdered 2 police officers in Palm Springs. A female police officer who had just got off maternity leave and now left a 3 to 4 month old baby with her husband, and another police officer who was a male who was going to retire at the end of this year and died doing overtime with this female police officer. So on to my second point. Prop 57 will cause the recidivism rate to increase. Just like someone has said earlier, recidivism refers to a person's relapse into criminal behavior, often after the person receives sanctions or undergoes intervention for a previous crime. So according to the 2015 evaluation report of offenders, between July 1st, 2010 and June 30th, 2011, 95,690 offenders were released from the California state prisons. Of these offenders, 42,661 offenders returned back to the state prison within 3 years. That's 44.6% of those people. That's almost 50%. So if this passes, what they're going to do is they're going to consider early or immediate release for up to 16,000 dangerous criminals back on the streets. They will be eligible for early release, giving them the opportunity again to break the law and to add to that recidivism rate. So I did a personal interview with the sheriff, and he told me that the inmates are starting to learn these policies. They know what they can get away with, what they can stay in jail just for a certain amount of time. So I quote him, he said, "My partner arrested a suspect for possession of methamphetamine and was released within 30 minutes. And within minutes of his release, he walked down the street, stole a car, and began a vehicle pursuit. Because he knew if he just takes methamphetamine or does certain types of drugs, he can get out really fast." So on to my third and final point. Proposition 57 is going to mirror Proposition 47. So what 47 was, that went ahead and went into effect in 2014. It's a law that changes some low-level crimes like drug possessions and petty theft-related offenses from felonies to misdemeanors. So, such as cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine, they are now seen at the level as marijuana. So since Proposition 47 went into effect, narcotic arrests have dropped while theft and resident burglaries have gone up. So according to the unintended consequences of a Proposition 47 article I read, it says the Sheriff's Department have seen property crime increase 8% from 2014. Auto thefts have increased 20%. Sheriff's officials say there is a link between drug and property crimes as some addicts steal to support their habits now. So now that they know they can get away with stealing, using some drugs, they start doing more things such as stealing bikes, stealing more items. So overall, Proposition 57 could result in higher crime rates, since 47 was a similar proposition with drugs, but now 57 is saying they can have early release for non-violent criminals. Therefore, I believe Proposition 57 should be voted no. Why? Because again, it does not clarify what non-violent felonies are. The recidivism rate will increase, and again, Prop 57 is a mirror of 47, which passed in 2014. So I ask you, when some of you or all of you go to vote on November 8th, go ahead and reread that one and see if it just says the non-violent felons. Do the research yourself and vote no. Thank you.
All right, well, the proposition is identified, but it is a proposition of policy, so that's a bit of a problem. The contents are previewed. I thought that you laid them out pretty well. In the body of the speech, you also signposted them well. On the first point, I didn't think that you explained this very clearly. You came up with a long list of crimes that my inference from what you were saying is these are no longer going to be considered violent felonies, and then you gave this long list. Now, why it is that they aren't, they're on this list, if they are being taken off the list in the proposition itself, you should be able to refer us to the sections of the proposition that does that. If this is an interpretation of what the concept of the proposition is, then you need to tell us where that came from. You're treating it as a piece of factual data, and I don't get any sourcing on it. I think that's a little bit problematic. The second argument was also clearly labeled. You had some nice information there, statistical information and factual data about the release of prisoners and what the recidivism rate was in regard to that. I thought that was okay. I'm not exactly sure how the case of John Felix applies in this situation, except that he served 18 months of 4 years. And I guess the argument here is that now we're going to have people in those other categories that you described who are not going to be serving 4 years, but only 18 months, which is, I guess, because under the law, the way 47 worked, he didn't serve as much time, and that's what created this particular problem. I guess that's the inference that you're making. I think it needs to be a little bit clearer. By the way, I don't mean to be obnoxious about it. It wasn't a few weeks ago, it was a few days ago. It just happened within the last week. So when you refer to that particular case, I think you can get let's get a little extra mileage. I'm sorry, that sounds, I don't want to exploit it, but let's face it, it just happened, and it would be something that people would probably have heard about, and putting it further back seems like it's counterproductive to your case. I don't want to say get extra mileage. That makes it sound like we're, phrasing on it is problematic for me, not for you. I shouldn't have said it that way. The notion that it mirrors Proposition 47, basically your argument here is that the results are going to be analogous, that what happened with 47 is likely to happen with Proposition 57. And with 47 we changed the definition of all these crimes, and here's all the negative stuff that happened afterwards. We're about to have the same thing happen again if we do 57. That's my interpretation of what your argument is. And so I think you could probably, I understood the idea. It could be expressed a little bit differently, but you did a good job explaining the concept there. The proof on it is a little bit vague. Of course, it comes from an interview that you did. I don't know how anybody's going to be able to check that information. It's a little hard for them to do. There might be other data that, at least the crime rates, that ought to be something that we can check on, and I think that worked pretty well. You sound very committed to your position as a speaker, and I thought that was an effective way of presenting also. All right, thank you.